So welcome back. In this video, we're going to be looking at Module 31. So exploring the idea of theories of physiology of emotion. So this one and the next module are going to be exploring emotion and why they happen and how they happen and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, kind of the precursor to the like when things go rough for us and happiness, things like that that we'll be exploring toward the end of the semester. So yeah, so you can check that out. If you're wanting to follow along in the book, we're on page 367. PowerPoint is in D2L like always, so you can track it along there. Beyond that, don't forget to listen for the 4 random facts as we go, and do both quizzes, both the one for this, for the lecture portion as well as for the readings. So I think that's everything. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So slide 2. We start where we always start in these, right? Theories and physiology of emotion, part 1. Emotions can be arousal, behavior, and cognition. So it's the different components of emotion. Emotion's interesting because it on one hand, it's very obvious when we're experiencing it, right? We generally know what we're experiencing. Even people like me who generally struggle with understanding our own emotions. I know at least at a basic level what it is I'm feeling, right? If I'm feeling happy, if I'm feeling scared, if I'm feeling angry, if I'm feeling sad, like those, at least for the obvious emotions. Where it gets more complex, that's where I start to kind of be like, I'm not sure what I'm feeling. And usually my wife helps me, which is handy. But it's good if you're somebody like me, marry somebody who actually, or at least get connected deeply with somebody who is better at emotioning than you are. But essentially, and so I understand it like in the logical sense of it, like this is something to explore rather than actually like digging down and figuring out what it is, how it's affecting me. But anyway, probably a good reason why I'm not a counselor today. But so the components of emotion are going to be bodily arousal. Essentially, how arousal, again, in this case, isn't necessarily like sexual arousal, although it could be connected to that. But it's how heightened is all of your body reacting, right? Your nervous system picks up, you get adrenaline going and stuff like that. You enter into an aroused state. This can be caused from emotion. It can also be caused from things like caffeine and things like that, which cause arousal within the system. But it's where you have like the accelerated heart rate. Maybe your cheeks get a little bit flushed. Your hands get cold or sweaty. You might feel sick to your stomach, right? That when you get high arousal, that's what you end up experiencing generally. Low arousal is when you're just kind of chilling through there. And so depending on what's happening there can be different effects to that. Expressive behaviors. So if I'm experiencing an aroused state, am I feeling happy, right? Maybe I'm excited with that. Am I expressing anger, clenched fists, eyebrows straight across, jaws clenched, all that? Am I experiencing maybe like flirtiness or sexual arousal, right? Like all those things can be expressed, and basically is going to change the effects of the emotion that I'm experiencing. And then the conscious experience of it, basically how we choose to interpret what it is that we're feeling. For example, they took some people. There was a study. I don't think the book talks about this one. This is an interesting study though. They did a study and they took a bunch of people. They brought them in. They injected them with basically a hormone it's an artificial hormone that causes you to get into an aroused state. It's essentially like the equivalent of an adrenaline shot. Some people, they told them that it was going to cause them to feel aroused, and some people they told them it was basically like a vitamin shot. So like not to expect much. Then they stuck them in a waiting room for them basically to be like, we're wanting to see how this makes you feel, kind of a thing. But in the room, they also had an actor. And this actor was trained to either do one of two things, or is instructed to do one of two things. One was to be kind of like obnoxious and kind of out there and loud. The other one was just kind of be like chill and just kind of be flowing with it. What they found with the participants is the people who didn't expect to have any kind of like a physiological effect, that aroused state from the shot, were more likely to sync up their emotions with the actor. So as their heart rate increased, their cheeks got flushed and things, they began to interpret the emotion that they were feeling as an emotion. Okay. So they might feel annoyed at the guy, and as their heart rate increased, basically got more and more annoyed at him, or maybe they kind of joined in and they were like, kind of getting all pumped up about it, or kind of just all these different factors, right? The people who were told that they would experience this aroused feeling, like the heart rate increasing and the flushed cheeks and everything, were pretty emotionally actually relatively flatline. They essentially didn't experience an emotional connection to the arousal because the arousal, they were expecting the arousal to happen just on its own. So there was no interpretation, there was no conscious experience of it, and no necessary expressive behavior of it, which means that essentially the arousal occurred without any emotion connected to it. Okay, so that's one example. So how do these three pieces fit together to explain emotion? That is one of the ways. We'll keep on rolling here. Slide 3. Theories and Physiology of Emotion, Part 2. James Lang theory is that arousal comes before emotion. And these are all, honestly, there's still kind of some, we're still trying to pin these down of why they work the way they do. Yeah, James Lang basically, they say that arousal comes before emotion, arises from awareness of specific bodily responses to emotion arousing stimuli. For some reason in psychology, we always use a bear coming out of the bush at you, right? Like you're walking along and a bear comes running out of the woods at you. You see the bear, your body basically reacts to the bear. You get this aroused state, heart starts pumping, right? Getting you ready for action, fight or flight kind of a thing. You interpret this aroused state with the given stimuli out there of the bear coming at you, that this must be fear, and therefore you get up and run away, or climb a tree or something. But by the way, if it's a grizzly bear, climbing a tree is a great idea. If it's a black bear, don't do it. They can out-climb you. But anyway, that's not a random fact. That's just a little side note. Cannon-Bard theory: arousal and emotion occur simultaneously. So essentially, your body comes up at the same time that you begin to experience the sensation or feeling of an emotion. Emotion arousing stimuli trigger bodily responses and simultaneous subjective experience. So essentially, you're having a conscious choice of how to do it. Your body is also reacting to it. So at this time, if the bear was coming at you, your body is getting aroused for action at the same time that you're making the conscious choice that this is something to be feared in some way, shape, or form, right? Schachter, Singer found that they had a two-factor theory. They felt like there was general arousal plus conscious cognitive label gave you the emotion. Okay. Your body is getting aroused because of the given stimuli. You make a conscious choice of like, I should be afraid of this thing, or I should be excited by this thing, or this thing makes me happy. And then given that, the emotion then comes from it. Okay. This is also, they also came up with the idea of the spillover effect. This is where like you get all pumped up from something. Let's say you go, let's say you go watch like some crazy action movie. Okay. Lots of explosions and everything coming else around you. You come out and you're pretty like pumped up from it, right? And then something happens. Somebody like, says something annoying or something to you. Because you're aroused, you might have a conscious label essentially that you connect to it. Right? I am aroused. This person annoyed me, but because you're aroused more than you normally would be, your expression is much bigger than it normally would be. This could be the same thing. You just had a terrible day at work, right? And it's just been rough, and you're just frustrated, and you're just done with it, and you get home, and your dog has pooped in your kitchen. Okay. Normally you'd be like, oh, it's annoying, it's gross. Then you pick it up and clean it up and no big deal. But because you're aroused from the rough day, you're more, all of a sudden you're like, oh, stupid dog. And you're like, kick him out of the house or something. That's going to be that spillover. It accelerates or makes bigger the overall effects. On the other hand, if you're having a great day, the spillover could be that you're much more lenient and much more, willing to work with people and or dogs or whatever, given that fact. Okay. But yeah, because of the fact that the arousal state is connected to hormones, they will remain with you longer than the neurological state would. So the aroused state will continue above and beyond. This is also why, like, if you get scared, if you've ever had anybody like jump out of the closet at you or something like that, you usually are going to react in one of two ways. You might end up actually trying to like punch the person. If the fight instinct is really strong in you, you might end up trying to run away, or you might just like freeze. Like those are kind of the ways that you're going to get there. But usually, once you realize it's not really a threat, you might get really angry. You might get like burst into laughter, or you might burst into tears. I've seen people do all three. Me and my friends used to do that kind of stuff in college all the time for some reason, but high school and college, right? But essentially, that's a way for your body to react to the extreme aroused state that kind of a jump scene kind of thing will cause within you. It needs to release that energy somehow, and so it generally is going to express it in those big emotions like laughter, crying, or anger. Those are ones that generally take more of an aroused state to achieve, and so those are oftentimes the ones that you're going to respond with. Okay, slide 4. But before slide 4, random fact number 3. Let's see. If you ate nothing but rabbit meat, you would die from protein poisoning. Basically, what happens with rabbit is there's very little fat. It's exceptionally lean, and it's very high in protein, ounce per ounce. And with that, essentially, without the fat, your body cannot properly utilize the protein, and so essentially you starve to death. You get what they call rabbit fever, and your body shuts down. It can kill you. So if you're going to eat meat and you need lean meat, rabbit might be the way to go. But generally speaking, you're going to also need to include some other fats in that to be able to utilize the protein that's available. So, yeah, there you go. Theories of physiology of motion, part 3, slide 4. Zajan Ledoux theory says they said that some embodied responses happen instantly without conscious appraisal. So they basically are building off of the previous examples. Okay. Let me see. I think there's an. There we go. On page 371, there's a little image in this PowerPoint that you can look at on 371. We have the event that's happening, right? And usually you have an appraisal, meaning something happens outside of yourself. Your brain takes a quick inventory of it and says, okay, this is what this category is. And then we have an emotional response. What they said is that there are times when you go directly from the event happening to an emotional response. When somebody blows out of the closet at you, you have an emotional response before your brain has time to appraise what has happened. Then, and generally that's going to be just straight up fear, right? You run in place, you try to punch the person, you just freeze and like, whatever. That's going to be an emotional response before your brain's had a time to appraise what actually is happening. Once the brain appraises it, then you end up with anger, laughter, crying, all those kinds of things, right? Because essentially that it's reversed the order that normally happens. So acutely sensitive radar for emotionally significant information is going to be part of this. And again, you can see this on page 371. It kind of gives you the breakdown. There's also actually a little table on 371 that gives you a brief breakdown of each of these different theories. Lazarus' theory is that cognitive appraisal defines emotion sometimes without awareness. So we're not consciously aware of the fact that we're appraising the environment and deciding what emotion to basically attach to it. But so again, it can be a cognitive where you're actually conscious of it, or on the other hand, you can also just be picking up on something. This can be kind of like the cognitive low road in this kind of thinking. Okay, so this would be where the event is happening. We appraise the event to some extent, and then it leads to an emotional response. This, to some extent, this could be like where you get like a weird feeling about something, right? You're not sure what it is, but you shouldn't go down that alley, right? Or a lot of soldiers talk about like once they've been over in Iraq or Afghanistan for a while in the last big conflicts, they just get like a sixth sense of like that road is dangerous, don't go down there. And then they find out later that there was like a bomb set for them or something like that. You pick up on things and you have an emotional response to it and aroused state to it, but you're not sure why. It's an unconscious kind of a thing. Okay. And generally, again, that's going to be connected to that dangerous or not, right? Sometimes figuring out is that sound just the wind, or is that something else that I need to be worried about? Okay. All right. Slide 5. Theories and Physiology of Motion, Part 4. What's this image? Let me go backwards. If you go backwards, page 370, you'll see this picture that we're looking at here on this slide. Basically, you have the thinking high road. So these are the two ways that basically the brain is going to make emotion happen. Fear stimulus comes into the eye. This is going to be the high road. Takes a little bit more thinking, right? Enters the thalamus, goes through the thalamus on this way to the visual cortex, starts to trigger an emotional response. Visual cortex then moves to the prefrontal cortex, where we are then able to cognitively assess what it is that we're looking at. Goes back down through the amygdala, where you trigger the emotional responses with hormones and everything, and then you get the fear response. So that sometimes is the route it goes. On the other hand, someone like blows out of the closet at you. I should have had somebody hide in that room right there and have them like blah at some point in this, but I didn't. That would have been smart. Surprise, no. But the fear stimulus goes in. The thalamus is basically triggered by it. Which goes directly to the amygdala, and then you have the fear response before you have a chance to assess what it is that you are seeing. Okay, it bypasses the visual cortex and the prefrontal cortex. It's still going to hit those. It's kind of like a reflex. Okay, if I pricked my finger with a pin, I would pull it away without having to think about it, and then I would say "ouch" after I've already pulled my finger away. Right? We talked about that already before when we were looking at the earlier parts of this. It's kind of like a reflex. It bypasses the conscious part of the brain in order for you to take action. If something was like, if something tried to come out of that room and actually was legitimately trying to kill me, and it just comes blowing out, it's a good idea that I am up and moving in action mode even before I know what the threat is. I can assess what the threat is after I am out of the way and it puts some distance between me and that thing, right? As far as my brain is concerned. And so it's going to continue that process, which then I can assess and be like, okay, it's not a bear trying to eat my head off. It's just my kid trying to scare me or something like that. Okay. So yeah, different possibilities of how we basically can experience things like fear. Fear is going to be one of the more common ones that occurs with. Potentially, it could be other things, but generally fear is going to be the one that you have this bypass that occurs. Okay. Random fact number 2. Red pandas have no living relatives. They aren't related to giant pandas at all. So I have no clue why they call them pandas. Maybe similar coloring patterns. I don't know. But yeah, there is no living relative today to the red panda. Slide 6. Embodied emotions. So basic emotions. A lot of science, and this is where you even get like that movie Inside Out and things like that. They were based off of this idea. There is some debate over this idea, and actually there are some. I've shared some videos this week with things. One of them that kind of looks at this. Let me see if I can find the name of it. Where are you? Tiffany Watts Smith, The History of Human Emotions, I believe is the one I'm looking for. Let me just click on it real quick and just make sure. Sorry, it's thinking. It's thinking. Yes. Look at the movie or the show. This is in the video section if you look on here. Tiffany Watts Smith, The History of Human Emotions. She goes through and really kind of, she's an anthropologist as well as she like linguist and things like that. But she looks at the idea of our ability to express emotions actually does in fact broaden our range of emotions. So some societies are actually capable of experiencing emotions that other societies are not capable of because they have words to describe those different emotions. But embodied emotions, a lot of anthropologists think that there are some emotions that are basically universal. The ones that are basically going to be always there are going to be the ones from Inside Out, if you've ever seen that movie. You have anger, fear, disgust, sadness, and happiness. Essentially, we are born with these 5 emotions. And some theorists say that all of the other emotions are essentially built off of these 5 emotions. Okay. Izzard added some additional ones. He added joy as something different from happiness. So happiness would be like something good happened, not like wee, kind of a thing. Joy is that kind of deep peace that lasts over time. He said we also have a sense of interest or excitement. This can kind of be connected to each other. Surprise, then sadness, again, same kind of thing. Anger, disgust, contempt. Contempt is an interesting one. Contempt is basically disgust at the actions of a person, which will make us feel contempt for somebody. If you see somebody giving you a face of contempt, which generally looks kind of like disgust, is that kind of a look while they're looking at you, like you can just give up. Basically, if you're trying to like romantically connect with them or make them a good friend, you've pretty much lost them on that one. Fear, shame, and guilt. And so he's added some additional pieces. And then Tracy and some of their colleagues also added pride and love to that list. There's a lot of debate still on if these are actual distinct, different emotions, right? Is joy truly different than happiness, or is it like a different level of happiness? And that's where a lot of the debate happens, right? Same with like interest and excitement. That could be connected to happiness potentially, but there does seem to be an official face that actually is different for interest and excitement compared to the other emotions. So that one might be there. Surprise, is that separate from fear? Maybe, right? Or is it just kind of a side road of fear, possibly? Sadness is the same. Anger, disgust is the same. Contempt, again, is connected to disgust, possibly, because it's basically disgust at a person's actions rather than like something nasty in your mouth or like a dead thing. Shame and guilt are also interesting because they're connected oftentimes to fear and sadness to some extent. Shame, essentially, we feel when other people are judging us for something. Guilt, we feel when we feel like we've done something bad or wrong, even if nobody else knows about it. So guilt is internal. Shame is somewhat external. And then pride and love, again, might be separate emotions, might be differences in these things, might be happiness connected to like sexual arousal, connected to maybe a fear of loss of that person. Like there's a lot of potentials there. But then again, they might actually be just separate emotions in and of themselves. So are these emotions biologically distinct? Good question, is basically what we're at today. We don't really have that many differences in physiological responses, so therefore they might not actually be biologically distinct per se. The love of a parent, the love of a child, the love of a lover, like a spouse or something like that. The love of a good friend. Those are all, that might be, there are some biological differences in how we respond to those compared to like just happiness or things like that. But again, it's a hard one to pin down so far, right? Because essentially it's just a different level of arousal with slightly different hormones present and as well as neurotransmitters present. You can have higher or lower levels of different neurotransmitters depending upon the given thing. So slide 7. Theories and Physiology of Emotion, Part 6. We've got a whole bunch of babies, the pictures of babies. You can find these pictures on page 372 if you want to look at these. But essentially, these are ones that a lot of people argue that are separate emotions from all the other emotions. So you have things like joy, the mouth forming a smile, cheeks are lifted, that little twinkle in the eye, right? Like there's that deep sense of happiness. That's beyond just simple happiness, although potentially maybe it's just a deeper level of the emotion of happiness, right? Anger, brows are furrowed, our face becomes square when we begin to experience anger. The eyes are somewhat low, the eyebrows are basically lowered to some extent to allow for the eyes to truly like catch while at the same time protecting them from potential attack. Mouth is clenched. Usually you got that flat line. You're ready for action with anger. Interest, you got brows are raised or knitted. Sometimes interest actually looks like anger. You might be like, oh, that's weird. Okay. You're interested in it, but it could be like this. Or it could be like, whoa, I didn't expect that. Okay. Kind of looks like a combination of interest and surprise, maybe. But interest, brows raised or knitted. Mouth is softly rounded. You get that like on a O a little bit. Lips may be pursed in some cases. So you might be, or it might be, oh, either way, I'm looking at myself in the camera, which is I'm not looking directly at you. I was like, does that look right? But yeah, that's going to be interest in general. It might be, and this is what some people argue, it could be a blending of surprise with joy, or even surprise and maybe frustration a little bit, depending on what it is that is causing you to be interested in it. But yeah, those are some possibilities. Disgust, recognizable no matter where you go. Nose gets wrinkled. Upper lip usually raises. The tongue will push forward, right? And goes outward. Essentially, this is the reaction naturally to things that we find gross, especially if it gets into our mouth. Blech, right? That's disgust. What you're essentially doing is you're ejecting anything that's in your mouth. You're scrunching your nose to essentially protecting your senses that are around your face. So the nose, the eyes, scrunch shut. You might even fully close them if it's really bad. You're just like, whoa, right? That is connected to disgust. We respond to that with like things in our mouth that are nasty, that we would consider nasty, potentially poisonous, usually bitter or sour, especially little kids. If you give them something really bitter or really sour, they'll show that disgust face pretty easily. If you come up on something dead and it smells nasty, we get that disgust, right? You might show this if somebody around you is doing something that you find distasteful, you might show this kind of sign of disgust, right? Stinky diapers, right? All those things. We have surprise, brows are raised, eyes are widened, mouth is rounded and oval shaped, right? Oh, kind of a thing, possibly. Not quite fear, but whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Again, it may lead to fear, or it may lead to interest, and it might be kind of a weird blend of between those two areas. Kind of a whoa, wow, wasn't expecting that one. And so that's where you get that kind of an expression. F, you have sadness, brows, inner corners raised, mouth corners drawn down, right? Kind of the frog face. But that's going to be your sadness. Fear, brows are level and usually up, drawn in and up. Eyelids are lifted, mouth corners are retracted, right? Oh, kind of a thing. You are essentially trying to get as much information as possible when you begin to feel fear. So your eyes open really wide to take in more light, to allow you to basically gather in all of the information from your entire environment as much as possible. The mouth opens to take in breath. There's a lot of times you'll hear that when somebody gets really scared, there's that real quick inhale where their body is basically getting as much oxygen as possible, as fast as possible, to be ready for action, no matter what might be coming at them, whether that be a Godzilla monster coming down the road, or a wolf, or some jerk that you don't really want to see. Your crush coming down the hall towards you. All these things potentially can cause a fear response, right? Your person jumping out of the closet over there. So yeah, but those are going to be all, again, universal expressions. You can go anywhere on the planet. They actually have gone all over the planet. They've gone to places like Papua New Guinea, where they met with different people that basically had very little experience with Westerners, and they asked them. They would give them a scenario like your son dies. What would be the expression you show? And they would, feel sad. Or someone stole your hunting equipment. They'd be like, and they showed the same expressions. Someone was really good to you, and they gave you these things. What would you feel? Happy, kind of a thing. All of these things, the expressions are universal. It is what we do as humans. Interestingly, it is not always the same expressions that chimps do. Sometimes what we would consider a good expression, chimps would actually see as threatening. And sometimes what we would see as threatening, chimps are like, oh, that's fine, no big deal. So it's not like interspecies. It is a human thing in these emotions. You can learn the expressions of great apes and things, but you don't just expect them to come naturally necessarily. Slide 8. Emotional arousal. So these are going to be basically your two states. And these we looked at this a little bit earlier when we were looking at like the stress and things like that in our biology, right? So you have the sympathetic division of the nervous system, and you have the parasympathetic division of the nervous system, essentially arousing or calming, right? When you are entering into a aroused state, your eyes are going to dilate, take in more light. That's why sometimes if you get really scared or really angry or experience any kind of like a really intense emotion, you might notice that the colors feel brighter in the memories of those. To some extent, that is actually because you were perceiving them brighter because your eyes were dilated, taking in more light than normal. Salivation decreases. Essentially, your whole digestive system starts to shut down as you get aroused. Your body doesn't want to waste energy on digesting food. That's a lot of blood flow to digest food, and so therefore it wants to divert that to other places in the body. And so the part, like, that's why if you start to get scared, let's say you're going to do a speech and you got the kind of look on you. You might have a dry mouth. You have to drink more water, things like that to work with it. That's a fear response essentially in that case. So pupils dilate, salivation decreases, your skin perspires, you get sweaty hands. You might, if you see someone who's like giving a speech and they're legit nervous, like, their shirt might be soaked under hair and things like that. It's natural. It's also relatively stinky usually because there's hormones that are getting released that are getting pumped out through your pores also. But so yeah, if you're nervous, you're meeting somebody new, and maybe you're meeting your special someone's parents for the first time or something, you might get nervous. You might notice those kinds of things. In those cases, you might want to wear black. It does not show the sweat as easily as white or gray. Respiration increases. Your breathing rate will pick up. If you get really scared, you might even get to the point of like hyperventilating, right, kind of a thing. That's like stop. You need to take a breath. But yeah, that's going to increase deeply. You're getting as much oxygen as possible into your system for action. Heart rate accelerates. Digestion, again, is inhibited. This is why you might feel sick to your stomach if you're getting really nervous. Again, if you're in that speech, kind of a thing, your digestion might shut down on you. So you might feel sick to your stomach and or even vomit. Adrenal glands are going to be secreting stress hormones like crazy. That's why you get the jitters, actually. It's those hormones. It's also why caffeine can make you jittery. And my hands aren't normally like that, right? My hands are like this. But if I drank a lot of caffeine or if I was scared, you might see like a tremor. That's actually because caffeine hijacks the adrenal glands essentially and releases stress hormones into your system. It's also why if you struggle with anxiety, you probably want to avoid caffeine for the most part because you're essentially upping that aroused state. Anxiety oftentimes is because you're stuck in kind of an aroused state and your body isn't sure what to do with it. So it starts to make interpretations of why you are in aroused. Immune system functioning is reduced because generally, if you are full on stress mode, where your sympathetic division is needed in its highest level, at that moment, your body doesn't give a rip about disease, right? It's getting all of that energy ready for action in the moment. Okay. Also, part of the reason why it can be dangerous if you are stressed for a very long time, where you're kind of in this aroused state for an extended period of time, it can actually decrease your immune system, make you more likely to get sick, even from just simple diseases. And usually the diseases will hit you harder than if you are more calm and collected. So that's the aroused state. The calming state, or the parasympathetic side of it, eye pupils are going to contract back to normal. Again, if there's enough light in the room, they're going to be relatively small. You should be able to see mine. Mine are relatively, with the blue eyes, it makes it a little easier. If I dimmed the room, right, like they get real big, or if you somehow scared me really bad, you might see them pulse. You'll also see them pulse at things that you like. Example, they've done experiments. They took a bunch of men. It works better with men than women. But if you took a bunch of men and you flash naked women in front of them, typically, their eyes are going to pulse because we biologically like what we see. Okay, so if you show a picture of a naked woman, boom, eyes are going to dilate. But as we're calming, eyes are small. Salivation increases. We're getting ready for digestion again. Skin dries to normal, right? You don't have sweaty. Generally, you don't have sweaty palms all the time, or you're not like, unless it's hot, you might be sweating from your pits all the time or whatever. Respiration decreases to your normal 7 breaths per minute, give or take, for the average person. Heart rate slows again down to that. If you're resting, might be at anywhere from 60 to 75, 80 beats per minute. Digestion will activate. You can eat and digest again without any feeling sick. Adrenal glands decrease secretion of stress hormones. That's a lot, which is causing your body to basically come back down and calm. And the immune system functions is enhanced during this period. They've actually found that things like meditation and things like that can increase you're tapping into the parasympathetic division, which calms you, and it actually can make your immune system work even better than normal, as well as increasing your digestion and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. All right. Slide 9. Again, you can find that image on page 373. I don't know if I said that or not. Slide 9. And before I do that, though, random fact number 3. Cranes are built using cranes nowadays, which makes you wonder how the first crane was built. But my guess is that somebody built a small crane and then used that crane to build a bigger crane, and then so on and so forth. But yeah, cranes, they use cranes to build cranes. All right, slide 9, theories of physiology of motion, part 7, physiology of emotions. So different emotions can share common biological signatures, right? The basic signatures are essentially aroused or not aroused. So a bear comes out ripping up the forest towards you, or a very attractive person comes walking towards you, or you just find out that you're going to, I don't know, is Elitch still around? Elitch Park, the theme park in Denver? I'm not 100% sure, but if it is, it's been a while. You just found out you're getting to go there with your, friends or something like that. All of those things are going to look biologically similar. It really is interpretation to some extent of what you do with that, right? Riding a roller coaster, having a bear come charging at you, having the object of your affection walking down towards you, all of those things your body is going to essentially arouse to it, but with different interpretations of what to do with that arousal. Thus, the emotion will change. Okay. Single brain region can serve as the seat of different emotions, such as the insula. So we got, let's see, did we talk about that in here? I don't remember. Anyway. And then some emotions have distinct brain circuits. So essentially, some emotions, the brain will wire itself to those emotions, making them more or less likely to happen. So people who are generally happy, their brain is actually wired for happiness, versus people who are maybe struggle with depression or anxiety or anger. The brain can actually wire itself for those emotions. Cool thing with that is, if your brain is wired for an emotion that you don't want it to be wired for, you can rewire it. It takes some work. I'd recommend working with like a therapist or something like that. But they can give you practices to essentially rewire your brain to decrease the emotion you don't want to experience as much and increase the emotions that you do, like happiness, right? Higher levels of joy. Slide 10, theories and physiology of emotion, part 8, lie detection. There's a little section in here on page 374 talking about polygraph machines and things also. So polygraphs measure emotion-linked automatic arousal. Essentially what they're looking for are spikes in your arousal state, right? And that's what the whole machine is basically looking at. Really fancy ones nowadays hooked up, and they even read like moisture levels in your skin. They might have a little camera that's like pointed directly at your eye that's reading like eye dilation and all these things. Changes in your breathing, your heart rate, perspiration. That's all the stuff that it's going to be measuring. What's tough with them is that that's all it's reading. And there could be lots of different reasons why you might be experiencing a spike at that moment. So about 1/3 of the time, polygraph test results are just just flat out wrong. They're not really a very accurate tool. The concealed information test is much more effective if I'm trying to figure out if a person really knows something, right? I might use a polygraph as basically almost like a decoy, but you ask questions and you ask a series of questions, and at some point you throw in a question that the only way you could know it is if you were there at the scene, right? So if I'm trying to find out something about someone, like if you were involved in a crime or something, I would ask you a whole bunch of questions, a whole bunch of questions, a whole bunch of questions, and I'd throw a question in there that the only way that you would know it is if you were there. Most people slip up and basically admit that they were there without realizing that they admit they were there. Right? You'll see this in a lot of detective movies and stuff. But the reason it's there is because it's legit. It works. The polygraph, what's more important than the polygraph machine is the person who is trained how to use it. Because a good polygraph expert basically is going to be looking at the person more, using the machine to some extent, but reading the person's emotions, how they're interpreting it. That's much more useful to that person in detecting if the person's actually telling the truth or is likely telling the truth or if they are likely lying. There's lots of things you can do to beat a polygraph machine, right? I can hype myself up and just keep myself at this level like really high so that even if I have like a response, my heart rate is already high and there's not really much difference. Or I can you can learn to just be like, no matter what, you're just chill, heart rate is low, keeping it low, just mellow out. If I can maintain that, and even if they throw questions at me, then I'm like, man, that's kind of uncomfortable. But I stay low, it basically, it won't show any difference. And there are people who are really good at controlling themselves, and they can learn to basically beat a polygraph with no problem. So yeah, interesting stuff. Random fact number 4, before we call it a day. In every scene of Fight Club, there's a Starbucks cup. And you might have already known that, but that's kind of an interesting one. If you ever see that movie, pay attention to the Starbucks cups. Okay, and with that, we'll wrap it up. So make sure you read the chapter, again, or the module. Message me if you have any questions. Don't forget to do the quizzes for both the lecture as well as the module itself. And I will see you all in the next video. In the next video, we're going to be looking at expressing and experiencing emotion. So going beyond just the kind of the physiological things. It's a little bit repetitive of the one we just did, but it goes a little bit more in depth and gives you some chances to explore that. So I will see you all in module 32, expressing and experiencing emotions. Have a great day, everyone. Great night, whatever time it is, and I will see you in the next video. We'll see you. Bye.